Thank all of you for your comments, and so we're going to spend some time with you talking about the global auto industry. We're lucky to have Dr. Carl Hahn with us, who obviously has built Volkswagen into a powerhouse and has been at the top levels of the auto industry for 50 years, as he said this morning. Dr. Hahn, what would be your advice for Hyundai and all that we've heard here? If you had an opportunity to sit down with the CEO of Hyundai Motor, what would your advice be to him about how to avoid the mistakes that GM and Toyota have made, and how would you put your arm around his shoulders? What would you say to him? How should he do his job better?
Is it on? Yes. This is a very kind question, I must say. Hyundai has been the fastest growing automobile company during the last decade. So I don't think that they need too much advice how to do better, as they have been doing better than anybody else. And as a consequence, I must say, they have, coming from Korea, in a country which certainly was not over-industrialized 30 years ago, which was a poorhouse of Europe, they have created, like through other corporations in your country, a company today operating all over the world. They have not taken on the risks General Motors has taken on, and I mentioned it a little bit this morning. The General Motors board is mainly finance people. They were interested in shareholder value. They had compensation systems for their top management which were directly related to the profit per share. And this more and more induced American managers to look more at their bonuses than at any long-term strategy. And I don't think that this risk does exist here in a country which knows austerity, which has known suffering, and which has clear objectives. General Motors has been ruined by success. Success is, on the other hand, a very dangerous element, I must confess. But we have to realize General Motors was founded 101 years ago. Out of these 101 years, they were most successful over 60 years. And then they lost with this emphasizing finance. And the finance people on the board, they were far from the market, and there were very few engineers making it to the top echelon in General Motors recently. And these are all elements. You get away from the market, you get away from the customer, you get away, what is very important, from your competition, as that's what you have to watch all the time. And so slowly, when you come from a 50% market share, I must correct my friend Mr. Tracy from Detroit. He made an excellent analysis of General Motors with 50% market share. In my young days in the United States, the problem of General Motors was to get so successful that they would go beyond 50% market share. They had to slow down their sales. This is a degree of success they had as the competition authorities of America. They would have dismantled General Motors had they had more than 50% of the market. So they have now the opposite problem, as you can imagine. And I see no link between Hyundai. Hyundai is still moving up. They are young and they don't have the problems of old successful warriors getting tired.
Jim Treese, in your comments, you were suggesting that General Motors and Toyota both stumbled. Were you suggesting that you see some signs that Hyundai is facing the same challenges, or that they are possibly falling into some of the same traps that the larger companies did?
Not yet. And I would agree with that Hyundai has been an amazing company. Let's not look over the last 30, 40 years, because this is a shorter term industry. Its product cycles are not quite that long yet. They have been highly successful for many years, including the most recent 3 or 4 years. They've sailed through this recession. And I would point out one thing. Dr. Han's presentation this morning made a very good case for the importance of the developing markets of China, India, Russia, Brazil. I don't know of any other company that has been as successful as Hyundai Kia in both China and India. Most major automakers are doing well in one or the other. They're doing very well in both of them, and that's a remarkable achievement. That shows very good international management. But I would caution that, as with Toyota wanting to be number one and then learning that there are problems that come with being number one, down the road, I would urge Hyundai to say, what are our real ambitions and what is the reason for those ambitions? What do we really want to achieve? Is it serving more customers or being number one? A numerical target is not as important as being true to your calling to serve customers. And long term, that may become a problem. I don't think it is yet, but it's something to watch.
Dr. Lee and Mr. Byun, when you look at the world, what do you see as the number one challenge facing the Korean auto industry? Is it Chinese? Can you identify what you see as the number one challenge?
Certainly, Chinese auto industry is becoming stronger and stronger. That will give us some threat in the future. That's the biggest challenge, I think.
How fast can that emerge?
Well, maybe in five years. But when it comes to electric vehicles, it will be even fast, earlier than that, earlier than 5 years.
So how give us your scenario on how that might happen, or what are the possibilities? It would be a Chinese smaller private sector company with a strong battery technology that has an alliance with a Western distributor, and they suddenly burst onto the world stage. Could that happen in 5 years?
There is a possibility. We've got to be prepared for that.
Right. Mr. Byun, what do you see as the number one challenge that faces your company as you operate successfully in so many different countries? I mean, you've become a multinational. What do you see it could be the biggest challenges internally? How do you organize yourself? Or do you see an external challenge as being the most significant?
저희 만도는 역시 현대 기아의 주 납품원이었으면서 지금 이제 글로벌 기업으로 커나가고 있습니다. 가장 중요한 것은 역시 기술인데 저희들 R&D 투자가 회사 규모에 비해서 타 경쟁사 대비 낮기 때문에 앞으로 가장 저희들이 챌린지 해야 될 건 역시 기술 개발, R&D 투자를 좀 더 늘리고 커스터머를 좀 더 다각화하는 일이라고 보겠습니다.
What is your breakout in your sales now? U.S., China, Korea. What is the rough geographic distribution of your sales?
현재는 국내가 전체 매출의 한 60%, 그다음에 미국이 20%, 그다음에 중국이 한 10% 정도 되고 나머지 이제 인도라든지 제3국이 되겠는데 앞으로는 저희들이 국내 판매보다는 구라파 쪽의 판매를 좀 늘리고 또 아울러서 시장이 커나가기 때문에 중국 시장의 판매를 배 이상 2015년까지는 배 이상으로 늘릴 계획을 가지고 있습니다.
So ultimately, what would you like the balance to be in your sales? Maybe 40% in Korea and 60% in the rest of the world, or what would you? And how big a company could you be? Do you think?
이제 국내 내수 구조는 좀 줄여가면서 해외에 내 판매 비중을 높이려고 그러기 때문에 밸런스가 국내 40%, 해외 60%인데 60% 중에 노스 아메리카 쪽에 한 20%, 그 다음에 중국에 한 20%, 나머지 구라파라든지 제3세계 해서 밸런스를 맞춰 나가려고 합니다. 20% 정도 해가지고.
And so you can continue growing as rapidly as you have been in terms of total size of sales?
저희들이 볼 적에는 특히 중국 시장이라든지 인도 시장, 그 다음에 남미 시장 같은 데가 늘어나기 때문에 그쪽 시장을 저희들이 공략을 한다면 판매는 계속 늘어나리라고 봅니다.
So feel free to jump in and ask questions of each other, but as a professional question asker, I'm happy to continue asking. And we also
Microphone, please. Microphone, please.
And we'll also entertain your questions.
May I just mention the remark which was made that it's dangerous to be targeted to be number one as what is Volkswagen's target. It's a matter how you reach it. I'm not active anymore, but I'm an observer what Volkswagen is doing in the world. And wherever I come to the world, in every region, what do I find? Volkswagen growing fast, and Volkswagen having not enough cars in the market. They are in short supply. So Volkswagen is creating the market. And this, of course, is very different from pushing into a market with a short-term vision. You have to have a long-term vision. And this is also why Volkswagen has selected new alliances. One example, as I mentioned this morning, Suzuki, to have a partner here in the region with the right mentality, with the right mind, the right software, in order to be what is so important. Everywhere you are, you have to be local. And this is, of course, getting more and more difficult when you have to be everywhere. But how to handle this between the center and the peripheral areas where the happening is taking place. You mentioned this issue. The important issue is decentralization, and for decentralization you need communication, you need excellent people, people who have your philosophy, and then you can give them the authority to decide vital issues in their market right away when the situation warrants it.
Dr. Hahn, give us your view on the world, the big picture. We've seen consolidation and many brand names going away. We've seen Mercury, the Ford luxury market has disappeared. General Motors has shut down 4 brands, sold. The Jaguar and Land Rover brands have been sold to Tata. Volvo has been sold to Geely in China. So some of these brand names are disappearing, yet we see other companies springing up. So what's happening to the industry on a global basis? Is there a consolidation and a shakeout taking place, or are some competitors being merely replaced by new competitors?
I think there are some competitors replaced by new competitors, as we have the blessing, which is most unique, and it didn't happen in the last 40 years in this proportion, that overnight for the automobile industries, from the sky, 3 billion people came into the marketplace. So we are at the present time, today thanks to China, tomorrow thanks to India, and of course with the rest of Asia, in the blessed situation that we have a never before potential expansion of our market. And of course some people, notwithstanding these fantastic environmental situation, were missing boats, were misjudging their future. And this has created that people go and people come. But this is part of the market economy. As this is the secret of the market economy, the auto purification, the selection by the marketplace in good, future or bad, and you are out. As this has created progress, the acceleration of technological progress and of every progress which has brought this prosperity. Look at your country. You were one of the poorest countries in the world, I think the second poorest in the world. And today you are with a purchasing power parity of close to $30,000. This is fantastic. That's a success story we have seen very much in many parts of Asia. We have seen in South America now, not yet in Africa. We have in the old world, of course, not this growth potential anymore, but I think we can be very optimistic when we do it right, when we are conservative and careful. And careful means you have to have your ear on the ground all the time. Ear on the ground means watching your competition and talking with your customers. And of course, having an engineering team which is enthusiastic and close to the marketplace. Then you are moving up and will be successful. But it's getting more and more to be successful as we have more and more people with fantastic education entering this industry. And China, as Dr. Li just said, China is a completely new dimension which will enter this country. I mentioned this morning, in our first year in China, we produced 1,700 cars and had 23.5% market share. And now we are operating in the real dimensions, and these dimensions in China with 20 cars per 1,000 people. Of course, we are at the beginning of an explosion of investments, research and development, and a dozen of new, very strong, very intelligent competitors in China, which will or have already learned the trade very fast.
Jim, do you have a view on the question of global consolidation? Are we seeing a shrinking in the number of competitors, or are we just seeing a shuffling of the deck, so to speak?
I think we will see a rise in new brands we haven't heard of before. When we speak of electrification, opening up the possibility for what might be considered a niche vehicle, an electric vehicle that's used as the shopping car in a two-vehicle family, one that they use for long trips and commuting, in other words, just for driving around the neighborhood. Electric vehicles could do that very well, and I think Chinese companies may find that as the entry point, that not as much is expected of that vehicle, and that's something that they could provide and meet the customer's needs on. Whereas if you're taking something out to drive 300 kilometers on a visit to your grandparents off in the at a retirement home somewhere, you want a more reliable car. Right. So I think that we've lost some, but we will certainly see more brands come back into the market. If I could jump in on one other point that was made earlier about the rise of the need for investment to take advantage of these markets and such. We in the automotive press and the press in general like to focus on the big companies, the automakers, the Hyundai Kias and the Fiats, the General Motors and such. But the generally accepted number is that 70% of the research and development done in the auto industry is done by suppliers. I personally think that number is low. I think increasingly we're seeing a lot of the major technical work, certainly a lot of the battery work and such, is being done by suppliers, many of them new to the industry. And I think that brands will come and go, but the long-term success of every vehicle maker is tied to the strength of their suppliers. And I think that any automaker who spends its time beating down its suppliers just for price without realizing they need to make a profit to reinvest it in R&D will suffer long-term consequences.
So, Dr. Li, clearly
that used to be one of GM's other problems. It was only concerned with beating up its suppliers for price rather than saying, how do we become partners to develop a better car?
All American manufacturers did this, not just GM.
So, Dr. Li, clearly Hyundai's strategy is to invest heavily in R&D, 4.5% of sales, and this is obviously aimed at competing around the world, but it's also aimed clearly at staying ahead of possible Chinese competitors. We talked at lunch about how there's so much technology now is available from consulting firms and from different third-party providers. How do you assess the Chinese ability to buy technology off the shelf rather than developing it themselves? Might they be able to buy technology that would enable them to allow them to make dramatic progress, or do you think that they would have to rely on indigenous innovation to create their next wave of products?
You're right. See, these days, there are many prominent engineering consulting companies which can provide basic technologies like basic powertrain technologies or body design, things like that. But usually, that kind of engineering consulting company can provide conventional technologies, not the high-end, top-notch technologies, which is not available in the market. That OEM got to cover by themselves. So that can make the difference. And another problem is the consulting companies can provide that kind of technology, but how to link that technology to mass production technology, that is another hustle for Chinese manufacturers. So it will need some experience through some failure. That's what I'm thinking. So if they want to be the leader in auto industry, they cannot 100% rely on consulting companies. They got to do their own research work.
Right. So it seems that the real magic, the real secret sauce in the auto industry is not just the raw technologies, but it's the ability to pick a technology, to roll it out through the organization, to make it match the needs in the marketplace, so that it's really, the secret sauce is more than just owning a technology, it's applying the technology across products and across different geographies. Huh.
You're right.
So this is your competitive advantage.
I guess so.
So do you share this view, Mr. Bune, that the possession of the raw technology is not enough for a competitor to really to compete against you and Hyundai? That they have to have knowledge, they have to have failed with the technology, they have to have knowledge about how to roll it out against different products and different geographies. I'm looking for what the secret sauce is.
이걸보다는 저희들은 현대 자동차의 이제 메인 서플라이어로서 항상 그 R&D 파트하고 저희 R&D하고 긴밀하게 협조를 하고 있습니다. 그래서 선행 개발이라든지 기존 기술에 대한 개발을 같이 해가고 있으면서 또 저희들 경쟁사들이 하고 있는 거를 벤치마킹 해가면서 저희들이 같이 그렇게 발전을 시켜나가고 있습니다.
May I just add also, it's a matter of selecting. Whenever you make decisions on configuring a new product, there are many, many options. And the options are, on the one hand, advanced technology with certain risks, less advanced technologies, your position in the markets for which you have the product, and finally, you have also the cost problem and the price problem and your profit problem. So you have myriads of options to select, to choose, and this composition, this total you create, then determines your success. As a success is always a matter of the amount of things you did right and wrong. You will never be right 100%, but you must be better than the competition and better than the client is expecting you to be, to surprise him, to make him smile, to make him proud, to show his neighbors how intelligent he was in choosing your product. Then you are in good shape in selecting the right technologies you have to select from.
So Dr. Han,
100% agree. Because it's a kind of continuous compromise process.
So, Dr. Han, you built the Volkswagen presence in China. You have deep knowledge of the Chinese. So how long will it take them to develop the capabilities you just identified that we've established now that it's more than just a technology? It has to be a process of adapting that, applying that, making the decisions about profitability. I mean, that takes real management depth. How long will it take them to develop something like that?
Well, China has been very famous for the last 4,000 years to invent a lot of things. So let's not underestimate the speed with modern technology of electronics, of computers. This is accelerating the catching up process tremendously. And the Chinese, of course, have learned from the foreign companies in China operating there. And they live now already within China in a quasi-normal competitive environment, a quite stiff competitive environment. So they are learning very fast. They are, I think, almost at the end of the learning curve to enter the world market, and they use the electric car as their key to open up this market, and they try in this area to get a competitive advantage. It's always important to have a competitive advantage, and our Chinese friends have this strategy in a very smart way, as I mentioned this morning. So we can be quite confident that the Chinese will be on the same level as all the other automotive producing manufacturers in the world, which will stiffen competition. And there will be not second-grade Chinese cars also, and there will be just Chinese-designed cars with their philosophy, how they understand the automobile. There are always differences between automobiles. As you know, you have a good choice to select the car you like, and this the Chinese will enrich in many ways. And as they have a very low-cost base, they can also intensify the price competition, which will also, of course, enlarge markets and accelerate processes. It's hard to say when they will enter the world market, as this depends also on the demand within China. We don't know with what speed really the Chinese government will continue to regulate the expansion of GDP. So far, they have done it better than anybody else in the history of the modern industries. And if they continue this way and they have enough capacity, at the present time it looks in China quite often that we don't have enough capacity in China, and they have to decide will they first start entering the world market. Entering the world market is one decision you can take overnight. Building sales, marketing and service organization is a lot of capital investment and requires an enormous amount of time. This you cannot do overnight. Besides, then you have to have also additional capacities. So let's not think that the Chinese will come like a tsunami over the world, but they will just go into the world market like all these processes have gone from step to step to step. And this will also happen to the automotive market when China enters, and India in a short while behind. They are already today, we have already today Indian vehicles coming into Europe and into Russia, trucks and so on. So this is a process which is already virtually beginning, and people gain the experience and so on.
I'd like to say also, I mean, to my mind, the question on China is when do they stop looking inward and start looking outward? Because certainly with most automotive suppliers, what you saw was they went into China thinking low cost, I'll make some parts there and I'll export them, and they never got the opportunity. The market grew so quickly that all of their capacity in China was sucked up by the domestic market. They were growing enormously quickly. They weren't growing slowly, but the market was growing even faster. And I think at some point we all assume the automakers in China both domestic and foreign in China might have to say, oh, we've got some extra capacity now for other markets. But up till now, certainly the capacity has been fully claimed by the domestic market. It's been an inward-looking industry. I don't see that changing soon, but that's the key question. When does the domestic market demand be met? I don't know, President Byun at Mando, whether you had the same experience in going into China, of setting up a factory and discovering that you could barely keep up with demand. But certainly that's been the experience of most suppliers I know of.
Mr. Byun, did you hear the question? Mr. Byun, Mr. Treese has asked you whether you've experienced in China, whether you've seen the explosive demand for the products not being able to not being able to satisfy that demand.
중국 시장에 대해서는 저도 그 질문이 하나 있는데요. 중국 시장의 자동차 시장을 보면 저희들 부품업체 입장에서 볼 적에는 자동차 시장이 지금 현재 가장 많이 팔리는 데가 해외 브랜드를 가지고 들어간 조인트 벤처한 OEM이 가장 자동차를 많이 팔고 있고, 그 다음에는 중국의 로컬 업체들은 사실상 숫자는 많은데 볼륨 자체가 굉장히 적은 것 같습니다. 그런데 저희들 입장에서는 같은 OEM 업체에도 부품을 납품을 하고 있고, 그 다음에 로컬 업체에도 부품을 납품을 하고 있는데, 자동차 판매 가격의 차이가 나는 것만큼 부품 가격도 차별화를 해서 요구를 하고 있습니다. 그러니까 예를 들어서 상해 GM 같은 데 납품하는 가격보다 진리나 장안에서 납품받는 가격은 15%에서 한 20%를 저가로 저희들 보고 납품을 하라고 그러는데, 사실 같은 품질이나 같은 기능을 가지고서 그렇게 낮은 가격으로 납품하기가 굉장히 어렵습니다, 저희들로서는. 그런데 이제 그렇게 볼 적에 앞으로 중국 시장이 과연 그런 그 외국 브랜드가 지금 폭스바겐 회장님 계시지만 폭스바겐이나 GM이나 또는 현대가 앞으로 중국 시장에서 언제까지 그렇게 차량을 많이 팔 수 있느냐, 과연 로컬 업체들이 커 나가는 그 시기가 언제가 될 거냐, 그게 어떻게 생각하시는지 회장님한테 한번 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
So you're asking me a question? So you're asking what are the growth curves like?
Yes.
Well, they're very rapid. I would guess that they're 20 to 30% a year increases in demand.
근데 내수 시장이라는 게 물론 그 조인트 벤처 OEM 블렌드 시장 볼륨이 더 많이 늘어나지 않습니까?
This is another question?
다른 퀘스천은 그러니까 로컬 업체, 중국의 로컬 업체들의 그 볼륨이 그런 조인트 벤처 브랜드 회사들이 생산하는 그 볼륨을 언제 쫓아갈 수 있느냐, 그 브레이크 이븐이 언제쯤 될 거냐 하는 얘기입니다. 계속 그러면 중국 시장은 외국 브랜드 차가 계속 많이 팔릴 거냐, 로컬 업체들이 따라올 수 있는 기간이 얼마나 된다고 보십니까?
Who are you asking your question to?
Mr. Han.
I'm sorry, I was with my thoughts somewhere else. What was the question?
Would you repeat the question, please?
지금 현재 중국 시장을 보면은 폭스바겐하고 합작한 회사가 가장 자동차를 많이 판매하고 있고, 두 번째가 GM, 그다음에 세 번째가 현대 기아입니다. 그리고 이제 나머지 밑에 중국의 로컬 업체들이 그 자동차 회사들이 상당히 많이 있는데, 그 판매하는 양의 차이가 그 상당히 많이 나고 있습니다, 로컬 업체들하고. 그럼 과연 그 로컬 업체들이 제가 말씀드린 진리라든지 무슨 체리라든지 장안이라든지 사이기라든지 하는 회사들이 그런 합작한 회사의 자동차 생산량을 쫓아올 수 있는 시기가 언제쯤 되리라고 생각을 하십니까?
So what was the question? When can the Chinese locals
Yes,
overcome the
foreign companies? Yes.
I think that's the question, Dr. Han. When can they overcome?
It's not a matter of when, it's when they have caught up with know-how you must get from somebody when you don't have it locally. And, excuse me, consequently, it's not something you can hand out like a recipe. But I would like to come back to another statement about Chinese exports. When exporting in small numbers, that's all right. This might be a valve and you have temporarily too many cars, but for this you need an organization then abroad, and this organization must be fed all the time. So when you really want to go into export markets, what do? You have to establish factories there, like Hyundai is doing in the United States, in Brazil, in India, and so on and so on. So it is not a simple issue that China will export automobiles in great numbers. You must be close to the markets. The taste in the markets, the configurations are differently, the structures are differently, and as a consequence, it's not a matter that the Chinese will come by 50 ships and ship automobiles all over the world. Even with the low cost of shipping, this is not the way you would do it, and it has not shown that this is the right way, as we see all over. So we have here processes which will take quite some time before you have the capital to build these factories and to invest all this money. So we have an enormous financial issue also here too.
My answer to your question, as someone who studied the Chinese, is that they have a huge learning curve in terms of learning how to manage multinational corporations. They have a huge cultural challenge in understanding that the rest of the world is not Chinese, and the rest of the world does not operate on the basis of Chinese cultural values. They are behind the Japanese and Koreans in understanding that and learning how to deal in a multinational, multicultural kind of environment. So what they can achieve in their home market is very different than what they might be able to achieve in international markets. Because in their home market, they'll have the advantage of the Chinese government helping them. Chinese consumers will give them an advantage, give them a preference. But when it comes to operating internationally, the rules of the game change very dramatically. So I think that they're going to face a very steep learning curve there.
But we see with Haier in the refrigerator market that they have learned very fast that they have excuse me, that they have bought up competitors all over the world, and they are now from a newcomer to the #1 in the world.
Right.
And I know that the Haier company has developed management systems we in the West study in order to learn from them. So the Chinese are full of surprises. All people are full of surprises. And you in Korea are full of surprises. When I think of Sony and Samsung, you have surprised the world.
Right, right.
Maybe I can make one comment, because last year China, the total production was 13 million vehicles last year. Out of 13 millions, 55% of the volume was produced by joint venture companies and 45% from local manufacturers. And the local manufacturers' growth rate is more than double of the joint venture companies. So I think within 2 years, it will become 50-50. It will become even. And then after 2 years, maybe local manufacturers will produce more vehicles than joint venture companies.
Could I add something here? I think that one of the factors in all of this is you have to look at the segments and the geography of the markets in China, where a lot of the growth of the domestic manufacturers have been in smaller vehicles, priced at points that some of the joint ventures would be very hard-pressed to reach. And you would think that eventually they'd want to start moving up in the market. But as economic development moves from the coastline inward, I think that there will remain, for many years, a very large market for basic cars in China. And that moving slightly westward steadily, there will still be a large market for that first car that a family ever owns. And that will, I think, remain the province of the domestic manufacturers. So they will be able to stay in that low-price, smaller segment for many years, longer than we might expect. Whereas Korean companies just have gradually moved up. The original Pony is far distant from today's the Equus and other cars.
Yeah, the Pony, yeah. Do you remember that?
That car could not be sold in Korea today.
No.
But that car, I think, will be able to be sold in China for many years. And so the domestic manufacturers will have the advantage of using tooling and equipment that has been paid off for many years and continuing to turn out similar vehicles for, again, first-time ever buyers.
So thank you to the panelists and thank you to our audience for being so patient. Thank you.